I arrived at my cherished lake house for a surprise weekend getaway, only to find construction crews tearing down walls and my parents directing major renovations. My mother casually explained they were expanding the property for my younger brother Jake's growing family, treating it like I should be grateful. I stood frozen, watching strangers demolish the reading nook where my late grandfather taught me to fish, realizing my own parents had betrayed my trust and invaded my most sacred space without permission. The sound of power tools and hammering filled the air where peaceful silence once reigned. Dust particles danced in the afternoon sunlight streaming through what used to be the kitchen window. Now it was a gaping hole in the wall, exposing the interior to the elements. My heart pounded as I watched a worker with a sledgehammer take another swing at the wall that separated the living room from the dining area. "Gerard, what are you doing here?" My mother, Patricia, emerged from behind a pile of lumber, wearing work clothes I had never seen before. Her hair was tied back with a bandana, and she carried architectural plans in her hands like she owned the place. "What am I doing here?" The words came out as a croak. "This is my house, Mom. What are you doing here?" She brushed sawdust off her sleeves and smiled as if this was the most natural thing in the world. "We're making improvements, honey. Jake and Sarah need more space for the twins, and with another baby coming, well, this place was just sitting here empty most of the time." My legs felt weak. I had inherited this lake house from my grandfather Harold 3 years ago. It was my sanctuary, my escape from the demanding pace of my marketing job in Chicago. Every piece of furniture held memories. The stone fireplace where Grandpa and I roasted marshmallows, the wooden dock where he taught me to cast a fishing line, the screened porch where we spent countless summer evenings talking about life. "You can't just renovate my house without asking me," I managed to say, my voice growing stronger. Patricia waved dismissively. "Oh, don't be dramatic. We're making it better. Look at these plans." She thrust the blueprints toward me. "We're adding a whole second floor, expanding the master bedroom, and creating a playroom for the grandchildren. Your brother's family needs this space, Gerard. You're single and you hardly use it anyway." A burly construction foreman approached us, wiping sweat from his brow. "Mrs. Peterson, we need to know about the electrical work. Do you want us to upgrade the whole panel, or just add circuits for the new addition?" Mrs. Peterson. She was using Dad's last name, but acting like she had authority over my property. The realization hit me like a physical blow. "Excuse me," I interrupted. "I'm Gerard Peterson, the actual owner of this property. Can you show me the permits for this work?" The foreman looked confused, glancing between my mother and me. "Well, sir, your mother here has been overseeing everything." She showed us the signed authorization forms when we started last week. Last week. They had been doing this for an entire week without telling me. "I need to see those forms right now," I demanded. My father, Robert, appeared from around the corner of the house, carrying a cooler of drinks for the workers. He looked uncomfortable when he saw me, avoiding eye contact. "Dad, did you know about this?" He set down the cooler slowly. "Gerard, your mother thought it would be a nice surprise. Jake really needs help, and this place has so much potential." A surprise. My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. "You're demolishing my house as a surprise." Patricia stepped between us. "We're not demolishing anything. We're improving it, making it useful for the whole family instead of just sitting here like a museum to your grandfather." The casual dismissal of my grandfather's memory stung worse than anything else. Harold had specifically left me this house because he knew how much it meant to me. We had shared our deepest conversations here. He had taught me about integrity, about standing up for what was right, about the importance of family bonds built on respect rather than obligation. "This house is not a museum," I said quietly. "It's my home." Patricia laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "Your home? You live in Chicago, Gerard. You visit here maybe 6 times a year. Jake's family could actually live here full time. Make it a real family home again with children's laughter filling the rooms. I looked around at the destruction. The workers had torn out most of the original kitchen cabinets, the ones Grandpa had built by hand in 1972. The hardwood floors were scratched and covered in debris. The stone hearth was partially dismantled, apparently to make room for a larger fireplace. You had no right, I whispered. We had every right. Patricia snapped back. We're your parents, and this family needs to stick together. Your grandfather would have wanted his great-grandchildren to enjoy this place. But even as she said it, I knew she was wrong. Grandpa had been very specific about leaving the house to me, not to the family trust or to be shared among siblings. He had pulled me aside during his final illness and made me promise to take care of the place, to preserve the memories we had built there together. The foreman cleared his throat awkwardly. Should we keep working, or... I looked at the man, then at my parents, then back at the ruins of my peaceful retreat. Everything I thought I knew about my family's respect for my boundaries was crumbling along with the walls of my grandfather's house. We need to talk, I told my parents. Right now, I demanded to see the construction permits immediately. The foreman, looking increasingly uncomfortable with the family drama unfolding, led us to his truck where he kept the project paperwork in a metal filing box. Here's everything we need, he said, pulling out a manila folder. Signed, authorization, building permits, all properly filed with the county. My hands trembled as I opened the folder. There, on official letterhead, was my signature authorizing extensive renovations to the property, except I had never signed any such document. This is forged, I said, staring at the papers in disbelief. Patricia peered over my shoulder. Don't be ridiculous, Gerard. You signed that 3 weeks ago when we discussed the plans. We never discussed any plans. I would never have agreed to this. I held up the signature line. The writing looked similar to mine, but the loops and angles were slightly off. Someone had practiced copying my handwriting. The foreman shifted nervously. Look, sir, I don't know about family disputes, but your mother showed me proper documentation. She said you were traveling for work and couldn't be here in person, so you had pre-authorized everything. What else did she tell you? I asked, dreading the answer. Well, she mentioned you were excited about the improvements but wanted to surprise your brother's family. Said you were paying for everything as a gift. He gestured toward the paperwork. The permits show you as the authorizing property owner, and the loan paperwork lists you as the guarantor. Loan paperwork. My stomach dropped. What? Loan paperwork? Patricia suddenly found something fascinating to look at in the distance. Robert cleared his throat and studied his shoes. The construction loan, the foreman explained, pulling out additional documents. $50,000 through First National Bank. Your signature is on the guarantee forms. I snatched the loan documents from his hands. There was my forged signature again, this time committing me to guarantee a massive debt I knew nothing about. According to the paperwork, I had personally guaranteed repayment of $50,000 for renovations to my own property. You took out a loan in my name, I said, the words barely audible. We took out a loan for improvements to family property, Patricia corrected, finally meeting my eyes with a defiant stare. Jake needs this space. Gerard. His twins are growing, Sarah is pregnant again, and they're cramped in that tiny apartment. This house sits empty most of the time while a young family suffers. So you committed fraud to fix that. My voice was rising again, drawing stares from the construction workers. We did what needed to be done for family, she replied without a trace of remorse. You make good money at that marketing job. You can afford this loan. Think of it as an investment in your brother's future. I pulled out my phone and immediately called my bank. After navigating through automated menus, I reached a loan officer, who confirmed my worst fears. Yes, Mr. Peterson. The construction loan was approved based on your excellent credit score and employment history. The funds were dispersed to Peterson Family Construction Services last week. I never applied for any loan, I told her. There was a pause. Sir, we have your signed application and income verification documents on file. Is there some kind of dispute? There's some kind of fraud, I said. I'm coming to the bank first thing Monday morning. After hanging up, I stared at my parents. You used my credit, my financial standing, my reputation to fund this unauthorized project. Do you understand what you've done? Robert finally spoke up. Gerard, we knew you'd be upset initially, but once you see how beautiful it turns out, you'll understand. Jake really needs help, and you're in a position to provide it. By forging my signature, by taking out loans I didn't authorize, by destroying the house my grandfather left specifically to me. I was shouting now, and the construction workers had stopped what they were doing to listen. Patricia pulled me aside, lowering her voice. Listen to me, Gerard. Your grandfather is dead. This house is just wood and stone. Your living family matters more than some sentimental attachment to old furniture and memories. Jake has 2 children and another on the way. He makes $22,000 a year managing that electronics store. And Sarah can't work with the babies. They need stability. Then Jake should get a better job, or you should help him find affordable housing. You don't steal from your other son to solve his problems. We're not stealing, she hissed. We're reallocating family resources more fairly. You inherited this house worth $300,000, while Jake got nothing from your grandfather except a few tools. It's not right that you should have so much while he struggles. The injustice of it hit me like a slap. Grandpa left Jake tools because Jake loved working with his hands. He left me the house because we had a special relationship and he knew I would preserve what we built together. That's not inequality. That's personal choice. Your grandfather played favorites, Patricia said bitterly. Always did. You were his golden boy who could do no wrong. While Jake was just the younger grandson who got lectured about responsibility. Well, now it's time to make things fair. I stared at her, seeing clearly for perhaps the first time how deep her resentment ran. This wasn't just about helping Jake. This was about evening scores she had been keeping for years. I'm calling my lawyer, I said. Call whoever you want, Patricia replied. But these workers have jobs to finish, and Jake's family needs this space. You can file all the lawsuits you want, but by the time anything gets resolved, the renovations will be complete, and everyone will see how much better the house looks. That's when I realized this had been planned as a fait accompli. They weren't asking for permission or forgiveness. They were counting on my unwillingness to destroy family relationships over property. They expected me to eventually accept their decision and pay the bills they had created in my name. But as I looked at the demolished kitchen where my grandfather had taught me to make his famous pancakes every Sunday morning, I knew I couldn't let this stand. Some boundaries were too important to cross, and some violations too serious to forgive without consequences. Everyone stop working. I called out to the construction crew. This project is suspended immediately. The foreman looked confused. Sir, we're in the middle of a job here. We can't just stop without proper authorization. I'm giving you proper authorization as the actual property owner, I said firmly. And I'm telling you that these permits were obtained fraudulently. Continue working, and you'll be participants in a crime. Patricia stepped forward. Don't listen to him. Hes upset and not thinking clearly. We have valid contracts and permits. But I was already walking toward my car to get my property deed and title documents. It was time to prove who really owned this house and who had the authority to make decisions about its future. The battle for my lake house was just beginning, but I was finally ready to fight. As I retrieved my property documents from the car, I heard the rumble of a large truck coming up the driveway. My heart sank when I recognized my brother Jake behind the wheel of a U-Haul moving truck with his pregnant wife Sarah in the passenger seat. They were here to move in. The truck pulled up next to the construction site, and Jake jumped out with the enthusiasm of someone arriving at his new home. His 3-year-old twins, Emma and Ethan, tumbled out of the back seat and immediately ran toward the construction equipment with delighted squeals. "Gerard," Jake called out, seemingly oblivious to the tension in the air. "Perfect timing. We were hoping you'd be here to see the progress. This is going to be incredible when it's finished." Sarah climbed down slowly from the truck, one hand supporting her 8 months pregnant belly. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes and the weary expression of someone who had been packing and preparing for a major move. "Where should we put the boxes labeled for the master bedroom?" Jake asked, already opening the back of the truck. "Mom said the upstairs expansion should be framed by now." I stared at the truck, packed with boxes, furniture, and children's toys. "Jake, what is this?" "It's moving day." He grinned widely. "Well, the first load anyway. Sarah's been packing for weeks. We gave notice on our apartment lease early because Mom said the renovations would be done by today." The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't just unauthorized renovation. This was a complete takeover orchestrated by my parents with my brother as the intended beneficiary. "You gave up your apartment?" I asked Sarah, who was now corralling the twins away from a power saw. She nodded tiredly. "Patricia promised the house would be ready for us to move in this weekend. We've been living on friends' couches for 3 days because our lease ended Wednesday. Mom and Dad told you that you could live here permanently," I pressed. Jake's enthusiasm faltered slightly. "Well, yeah. They said you finally agreed it made more sense for a family with children to live in such a big house instead of it sitting empty most of the time." Patricia approached us with that same defiant expression. Gerard was being selfish, hoarding all this space. I told Jake that once he saw how much the family needed this place, he would do the right thing. The right thing. I turned to face my brother directly. "Jake, did you know they forged my signature on loan documents?" His face went blank. "What? They took out a $50,000 construction loan using my credit and forged authorization. I never agreed to any of this." Jake looked back and forth between our parents and me. "That can't be right. Mom said you had signed off on everything but wanted it to be a surprise for us." "I'm telling you, I never signed anything," I said firmly. "I found out about this renovation 15 minutes ago when I showed up for a weekend trip." Sarah had gone very still, listening to our conversation while keeping one eye on the children. "Jake," she said quietly, "if Gerard didn't agree to this, where are we supposed to live?" "He did agree," Patricia interjected. "Hez just having second thoughts now that he sees the scope of the project. Gerard, you know how much your brother's family needs stability. Look at Sarah, 8 months pregnant and exhausted. Look at those beautiful children. Are you really going to put your attachment to old memories ahead of their immediate needs?" I felt the familiar weight of family guilt settling on my shoulders. Patricia had always been expert at making me feel selfish for having boundaries or needs that conflicted with her plans for the family. But then Jake said something that changed everything. "Actually, Gerard, you should be thanking us. Mom and Dad said this place was turning into a shrine to Grandpa, and that wasn't healthy for you. They said renovating it would help you move on and stop living in the past." The casual dismissal of my grief and my relationship with my grandfather ignited something inside me. A shrine to Grandpa? This house contains the most important memories of my life. He built most of this place with his own hands. He taught me everything I know about integrity and respect in these rooms. But he's gone, Gerard. Jake continued, apparently not reading the warning signs in my voice. You can't live your whole life trying to preserve everything exactly the way some dead person left it. Mom's right that families need to adapt and share resources. You've got this huge house, and you live alone in a Chicago apartment. We've got 4 people crammed into 800 square feet with another baby coming. It's just logical. Sarah was staring at Jake with growing alarm, clearly realizing that her husband had participated in something he didn't fully understand. "Jake," she said carefully, "did you know Gerard didn't sign the loan papers?" "Of course he signed them," Jake replied, but his certainty was wavering. "Right, Mom." Patricia's jaw tightened. "Gerard signed everything necessary for this project to proceed. Has just upset about the timeline and the surprises. But families sometimes have to make hard decisions for the greater good." I pulled out the loan documents and showed them to Jake. "Does this look like my signature to you?" Jake studied the papers with growing confusion. He had seen me sign documents dozens of times over the years. "It looks similar but different." "It's forged," I said. "They practiced copying my handwriting and committed fraud to fund this project." "That's not fraud," Patricia snapped. "That's family looking out for each other. Gerard makes $60,000 a year. He can afford this loan. Jake makes barely a third of that with 3 dependents. So you decided to redistribute our incomes without asking either of us." I was incredulous. Jake was beginning to understand the magnitude of what had happened. "Mom, you said Gerard agreed to help us. You said he wanted to gift us the renovated house. He should want to help you," she replied. "That's what families do. They share resources and support each other. Gerard has been selfish with this property for 3 years while his brother's family struggled in inadequate housing." Selfish? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I've loaned Jake money 6 times in the past 2 years. I paid for Emma's medical bills when she broke her arm. I bought groceries for your family when you were between jobs. How is that selfish? Sarah spoke up quietly. "You did all that, Gerard, and we've been grateful. But it wasn't enough," Patricia said. "Occasional help isn't the same as real family commitment. Jake needs permanent stability, not charity. So you decided to steal it from me and call it family commitment." Jake looked stricken. "Gerard, I swear I didn't know about the forged signatures. I thought you had agreed to help us. I would have helped you," I said truthfully. "If you had asked honestly about your housing situation, we could have worked something out. But you didn't ask. You conspired with Mom and Dad to take what they wanted me to give." Emma and Ethan had wandered back toward us, sensing the adult tension. Sarah gathered them close protectively. "So what happens now?" Sarah asked, her voice small and worried. That was the question that would determine whether my family could be salvaged or whether the damage was too deep to repair. But first, I needed to establish the basic facts about who owned this property and who had the right to make decisions about its future. "Now I prove that this is my house," I said. "And I stop this unauthorized construction before any more damage is done." I immediately called my attorney, Marcus Thompson, who I had worked with on business contracts. Even though it was Saturday afternoon, he answered on the second ring. "Marcus, I need emergency legal advice. My parents have been renovating my lake house without permission, using forged documents and fraudulent loans." "Slow down, Gerard. Are you at the property now?" "Yes, and there are construction crews here with permits that show my forged signature. They've taken out a $50,000 loan in my name. Don't let anyone else work on the property until I can review the documentation. Can you get copies of all the paperwork?" I spent the next hour photographing every document the construction foreman could provide, while my family stood around looking increasingly uncomfortable. The twins were getting cranky, and Sarah needed to sit down frequently. Marcus called me back within 2 hours. which should have been my first warning that the situation was worse than I had imagined. "Gerard, we have serious problems," he said grimly. "I've reviewed the documents you sent, and your parents consulted with attorney Dennis Whitman before starting this project." "What does that mean?" "It means this wasn't just an emotional family decision. They got legal advice about how to proceed." Marcus paused. "Whitman specializes in property disputes, and he appears to have advised them about something called adverse possession." My blood ran cold. What's adverse possession? It's a legal doctrine that allows someone to gain ownership of property by occupying and improving it for a certain period of time, especially if the original owner appears to have abandoned it or neglects to object to the improvements. I sat down heavily on what remained of my front porch steps. "Are you saying they could actually take my house? In Michigan, adverse possession requires 20 years of continuous occupation under most circumstances. But there are exceptions for cases involving substantial improvements to abandoned or underutilized property. Whitman seems to have advised your parents that if they made significant improvements and you didn't stop them within 30 days, they could potentially establish a claim." 30 days. According to the construction permits, work began 3 weeks ago. You have 1 week left to take decisive legal action, or their position becomes much stronger. I felt nauseated. They planned this. The timing, the legal research, everything. It appears so. I found records showing your mother researched property law extensively over the past 6 months. She found several cases where adult children lost inherited property to parents who made substantial improvements while the children lived elsewhere. Patricia had spent months preparing for this theft. She had researched legal strategies, consulted an attorney, and carefully planned the timing to give me minimal opportunity to respond. What kind of legal action can I take? Several options, but they all require immediate implementation. First, we file for a temporary restraining order to stop all construction. Second, we pursue criminal fraud charges for the forged signatures and unauthorized loan. Third, we file a civil lawsuit for property damage and trespassing. How much will this cost? Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Gerard, fighting this case properly could cost $15,000 to $20,000 in legal fees, even if we win. Your parents' attorney is counting on that being prohibitive enough to force you into settlement negotiations." I looked around at my family. Jake was unloading boxes from the truck while Sarah tried to keep the twins entertained. My parents were talking quietly with the construction foreman, probably trying to convince him to keep working despite my objections. "There's something else," Marcus continued. "Whitman filed documents with the county showing that your parents have been documenting your abandonment of the property. Photos of unused rooms. Records of how infrequently you visit. Maintenance work they've done without your knowledge. Maintenance work. Lawn mowing. Gutter cleaning. Minor repairs. They've been building a case that you've neglected the property while they've been maintaining it." The scope of their planning was breathtaking. While I had been living my life, working my job, and treating the lake house as a peaceful retreat, my parents had been building a legal case to steal it from me. "They documented everything," I said, understanding finally dawning. "It gets worse. I found social media posts from your brother's account over the past month talking about our new family lake house renovation project. Has been publicly claiming ownership rights." I pulled out my phone and checked Jake's Facebook page. There they were. Photos of the twins playing in what he called their new backyard. Posts about finally having space for our growing family. Updates about the renovation of our lake house. Jake had been publicly claiming ownership while I was completely unaware anything was happening. "Marcus, they've set up an elaborate fraud scheme designed to steal my property through legal technicalities. That's exactly what they've done. The question is whether we can prove it was fraud rather than a good faith family dispute about shared property." I walked over to where Patricia was still talking to the construction foreman and interrupted their conversation. "I need to ask you something directly," I told her. "Did you consult with attorney Dennis Whitman before starting this project?" She didn't even try to deny it. I wanted to make sure we were protected legally. Families have disputes about property all the time. Protected from what? You're stealing my house. We're improving underutilized family property for the benefit of family members who actually need it, she replied coolly. Dennis explained that property rights come with responsibilities. If you're not going to use this place properly, then family members who will use it have certain legal options. Legal options, like forging my signature and taking out fraudulent loans. Legal options like adverse possession and beneficial use doctrines, she said, using terms she had clearly learned from her attorney consultations. Robert finally joined the conversation, looking deeply uncomfortable. "Gerard, maybe we should all sit down and work out some kind of compromise. This legal stuff is getting out of hand." "It got out of hand when you committed fraud," I replied. "Dad, did you know about the forged signatures?" He couldn't meet my eyes. "Your mother said she would handle the paperwork aspects." "That's not what I asked. Did you know she was forging my signature?" After a long pause, he nodded miserably. "I told her it was wrong, but she said families sometimes have to bend rules to take care of each other. So both of my parents had knowingly participated in fraud, armed with legal advice about how to potentially get away with it through technicalities and timing. I realized then that this wasn't just about the house anymore. This was about whether I was going to allow my family to treat me as someone whose boundaries, rights, and autonomy could be violated whenever it served their purposes. "I'm filing legal papers Monday morning," I announced. "Criminal fraud charges, civil property damage claims, and a restraining order to stop all further construction." Patricia's composure finally cracked. "You would actually send your own parents to jail over a house. You would actually commit felonies against your own son over a house," I countered. "This isn't about a house anymore," she said angrily. "This is about what kind of man you're going to be. Are you going to be someone who helps his family when they need it, or someone who hides behind lawyers and technicalities to protect your precious solitude?" But I had heard enough manipulation for one day. It was time to find out what my grandfather had really intended when he left me this property, and whether he had anticipated that his own daughter might someday try to take it away from his chosen heir. That evening, after my family finally left to find temporary housing for the night, I sat alone in the partially demolished house and tried to process what had happened. The silence felt different now, violated and uncertain instead of peaceful and restorative. I decided to search through my grandfather's personal papers, which I had stored in his old roll-top desk in the den. I was looking for the original property deed and any documentation that might strengthen my legal position. But what I found was something I had never expected. Hidden in a secret compartment behind the desk's main drawer was a sealed envelope marked "For Gerard's Eyes," only in my grandfather's distinctive handwriting. Inside was a notarized document dated just 2 years before his death, titled "Amendment to Last Will and Testament of Harold Peterson." My hands shook as I read the contents. The amendment specifically addressed the lake house property and included language I had never seen in the original will. Harold had added a clause stating that the property was left to me individually and could never be claimed by other family members through any legal mechanism, including adverse possession, beneficial use doctrines, or claims of abandonment. But the most shocking part came next. The amendment included a specific provision about unauthorized improvements. Should any family member make unauthorized modifications to the above-described property without Gerard's written consent, such actions shall result in immediate and total forfeiture of that person's rights to any inheritance from my estate. Grandpa had specifically anticipated this exact scenario and protected me from it. There was more. A handwritten note explained his reasoning. "Gerard, If you are reading this, it means Patricia has likely attempted to manipulate the property situation in ways I hoped would never happen. I have observed her increasing pressure on you regarding this house, and I fear she views it as an asset to be redistributed rather than a legacy to be preserved. Your relationship with this place has always been about love and memory, not financial value. I have taken steps to ensure that no one can use legal technicalities to take from you what I specifically intended for you to have. The final paragraph made my throat tighten with emotion. I also want you to know that I established a separate trust fund in your name that Patricia was never informed about. The trust contains securities worth approximately $150,000 as of this writing. This money is specifically intended to provide you with resources to protect the lake house if legal challenges arise. Your integrity and respect for our shared memories have always made me proud. Do not let anyone convince you that defending what is rightfully yours makes you selfish or ungrateful. I immediately called Marcus, even though it was nearly 10 o'clock on Saturday night. You need to see this, I told him, and read the entire amendment over the phone. This changes everything, Marcus said when I finished. Not only does this explicitly prevent adverse possession claims, but it actually penalizes anyone who attempts unauthorized improvements. Gerard, your grandfather essentially predicted this situation and gave you bulletproof legal protection. What about the trust fund he mentioned? Well, need to contact the trust administrator Monday morning. But if it exists as described, you'll have the financial resources to fight this case properly without worry about legal costs. I spent the rest of the weekend installing security cameras around the property and documenting all the damage that had been done. I photographed every demolished wall, every torn-up floor, every piece of my grandfather's original work that had been destroyed. I also found text messages on my phone that I had initially dismissed as unimportant. Jake had been sending me photos over the past month with captions like, "Making progress on the house and can't wait for you to see the improvements." I had assumed he was working on his own apartment and hadn't paid close attention to the backgrounds of the photos. Looking at them now, I could clearly see they were taken inside my lake house. Jake had been documenting the unauthorized construction and sending me evidence of it, apparently assuming I was aware of what was happening. But the most damning evidence came from Patricia's own phone. She had been posting updates on a private Facebook group for parents dealing with ungrateful adult children and their inheritance issues. Marcus' assistant had found the posts through legal research. My son inherited a valuable lake house from his grandfather and barely uses it while my other son's family lives in cramped conditions, one post read. We've decided to take action to redistribute family assets more fairly. Sometimes parents have to make hard decisions for the greater good. The responses from other group members were equally revealing. Several people had shared strategies for challenging adult children's property ownership, including recommendations for attorneys who specialized in family asset reallocation. Patricia had been researching this theft for months, consulting with other people who viewed their adult children's inherited property as family assets to be redistributed according to parental judgment. Monday morning arrived with crystalline clarity about what needed to happen. I met with Marcus first, then with the trust administrator that my grandfather had appointed. The trust fund was real and contained even more money than Harold had estimated, nearly $200,000 that had grown through careful investments. With those resources secured, we filed a comprehensive legal assault against everyone involved in the unauthorized construction. Criminal fraud charges against both parents for forged signatures, civil lawsuits for property damage and trespassing, a restraining order preventing any further work on the house, and most importantly, formal notification that Patricia and Robert had forfeited all rights to Harold's estate under the terms of his will amendment. But I wasn't finished. Using the trust fund money, I hired a private investigator to research Dennis Whitman's other cases involving family property disputes. What we found was a pattern of advising parents to use adverse possession claims against adult children, often in cases involving inherited property. Whitman had built a practice around helping parents challenge their adult children's property rights through legal technicalities. He had never won an adverse possession case, but he had successfully forced several expensive settlements by threatening prolonged legal battles. Patricia and Robert weren't just thieves. They were part of a broader pattern of parents who felt entitled to override their adult children's property rights when it served their perceived family interests. Armed with all this evidence, I prepared for the confrontation that would determine whether my family relationships could be salvaged or whether the damage was too severe to repair. I called a family meeting for Wednesday evening at the lake house construction site. Marcus attended as my legal representative, and I insisted that Dennis Whitman be present as well to ensure everyone understood the legal realities. The setting was grimly appropriate. Construction equipment sat idle around the partially demolished house, creating a stark backdrop for what would either be a family reconciliation or a final break. Jake and Sarah arrived first, looking haggard from several nights of staying with friends while pregnant and caring for toddlers. My parents came in their own car, with Patricia maintaining her defiant demeanor, while Robert appeared increasingly defeated. Dennis Whitman arrived in an expensive sedan, a thin man in his 50s, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Jake made in a month. He carried a leather briefcase and the confident air of someone who specialized in exploiting family conflicts for profit. "Before we begin," I said, "I want everyone to understand that this meeting is being recorded and that anything said here may be used in legal proceedings." Marcus pulled out a digital recorder and placed it on the hood of my car. "This is highly irregular," Whitman began. "What's irregular is advising clients to commit fraud," Marcus replied coolly. I looked around at my family, feeling a complex mixture of love, disappointment, and determination. "I want to start by reading something that my grandfather left for me to find," I said, and pulled out Harold's will amendment. As I read the document aloud, I watched Patricia's face go from confusion to understanding to undisguised panic. By the time I reached the section about forfeiture of inheritance rights, she had gone completely pale. "That's impossible," she whispered. "I would have known about any will amendments." "Apparently you didn't know about several things Grandpa did to protect his intended legacy," I replied, and explained about the trust fund as well. Whitman was already looking uncomfortable, probably recognizing that his legal strategy had just collapsed completely. Jake spoke first. "Gerard, I swear I didn't understand what was really happening. I thought Mom and Dad had worked everything out with you." "I believe you," I said. "But you also didn't ask any hard questions when they told you that you could move into my house permanently." Sarah had tears in her eyes. "We're so sorry. We never would have participated if we had known about the forged signatures and the unauthorized loan." "I believe that too," I said gently. Sarah had always been honest and straightforward, which made her situation particularly tragic. Patricia finally found her voice. "This is all legal manipulation. Your grandfather was manipulated into writing that amendment by his declining mental state. We can challenge its validity." "On what grounds?" Marcus asked. "Harold was mentally competent when he wrote it, and it was properly witnessed and notarized. On the grounds that it was specifically designed to override normal family obligations and property sharing," Whitman interjected, apparently deciding to double down on his original strategy. "There are no normal family obligations that require adult children to surrender inherited property to their parents," Marcus replied. "And there are certainly no legal doctrines that permit fraud and forgery to accomplish property redistribution." I took a deep breath and delivered the ultimatum I had prepared. "Here's what's going to happen. You have 24 hours to accept my terms, or I pursue full criminal prosecution and civil litigation." I pulled out a written document that Marcus and I had prepared. "First, all construction stops immediately, and you arrange for restoration of the property to its original condition at your expense. Second, you repay the fraudulent $50,000 loan within 90 days. Third, you publicly apologize for the fraud and property damage, including corrections to Jake's social media posts claiming ownership of my house. Patricia started to object, but I continued. Fourth, Patricia and Robert forfeit all inheritance rights from Harold's estate, which means approximately $200,000 in assets that will instead go to Jake's children's education funds. Fifth, you all attend family counseling to address the boundary violations and manipulation that made this possible. And if we don't agree, Patricia asked defiantly, then I file criminal fraud charges against both parents, which carry potential prison sentences of up to 5 years. I pursue civil damages for property destruction, emotional distress, and legal costs, and I ensure that this case becomes public record so that future victims can recognize Whitman's fraudulent legal strategies. Whitman stood up abruptly. I don't have to listen to these threats. You absolutely do, Marcus said, because we're also filing a complaint with the State Bar Association about your pattern of advising clients to commit fraud. Your other cases involving adverse possession claims against adult children are going to receive very close scrutiny. For the first time, Whitman looked genuinely worried. Robert spoke for the first time all evening. Gerard, we never wanted it to go this far. Your mother thought we could work everything out as a family without lawyers and legal threats. Dad, working it out as a family would have meant asking me directly about helping Jake instead of forging my signature and stealing my property. Patricia's composure finally cracked completely. You're destroying this family over money and property. Your grandfather would be ashamed of you. My grandfather protected me from exactly this situation because he knew it might happen, I replied. He understood that some people view other people's property as family assets to be redistributed according to their judgment. Jake looked stricken. Gerard, what happens to my family? We gave up our apartment, and Sarah's due date is 6 weeks away. That was the question that would determine whether this confrontation led to healing or permanent estrangement. My anger was justified. My legal position was unassailable. But Jake's children were innocent victims of their grandparents' schemes. That depends on whether your parents accept responsibility for the damage they've caused and agree to make it right, I said. If they do, then we work together as a family to solve your housing situation honestly. If they don't, then they'll be dealing with criminal charges instead of family problems. I looked around at each of them. You have until tomorrow night to decide. Patricia's response came faster than I had expected, and it was worse than I had feared. Instead of accepting responsibility, she hired Dennis Whitman to challenge Harold's will amendment in probate court, claiming that my grandfather had been mentally incompetent when he wrote it, and that I had manipulated him into disinheriting the rest of the family. The legal filing became public record, and within days, the local newspaper picked up the story. Local family battles over lake house inheritance and fraud claims ran as a front-page story in the regional section, complete with photos of the half-demolished house and quotes from county officials about the forged permits. The publicity was devastating for everyone involved. Community members who had known my grandfather for decades came forward with letters to the editor describing Harold as sharp and decisive until the day he died. Several people mentioned witnessing Patricia's inappropriate pressure on both Harold and me about the lake house over the years. I remember Harold telling me he was worried about Patricia's sense of entitlement to family assets, wrote one neighbor. He specifically mentioned concerns about what would happen to the lake house after he passed away. But the most damaging consequence was what happened to Jake's marriage. Sarah had been devastated to learn the full extent of her husband's participation in the scheme when she discovered that Jake had been posting social media updates claiming ownership of my house while knowing the construction was unauthorized. She felt betrayed and manipulated. I thought we were accepting help from family, she told me during a tearful phone call. I didn't know we were participating in theft. Jake's marriage began unraveling when Sarah realized that her husband had been willing to benefit from fraud without asking difficult questions. She moved back in with her parents, taking Emma and Ethan with her, and filed for legal separation. "I can't trust his judgment anymore," she explained to me. "What if he makes other decisions that put our family at risk without thinking through the consequences?" Jake lost his job when his employer learned about the fraud charges through the newspaper coverage. Small-town businesses couldn't afford to keep employees who were involved in public legal scandals, especially ones involving forgery and theft. The construction company sued Patricia and Robert for payment, since the project had been authorized through fraudulent documentation. They also filed a lien against my parents' house when Patricia couldn't produce the money to pay the outstanding bills. Within 2 weeks of the public confrontation, my parents' comfortable middle-class life had collapsed into financial and social crisis. Friends began avoiding them. Their church asked them to step down from volunteer leadership positions. Even extended family members started distancing themselves from the scandal. Robert finally reached his breaking point and called me privately. "Your mother has lost her mind," he said, his voice hollow with exhaustion. "She's convinced herself that she's the victim in all this, that you and your grandfather conspired against the family. She talks about the will challenge like it's some kind of crusade for justice. Dad, what did you think would happen when you participated in forging my signature?" "I thought it would work out," he said miserably. Patricia was so confident about the legal research. She said families do things like this all the time and work out the details later. "I never imagined it would destroy everything." "You never imagined you'd get caught?" I corrected. "No," he admitted. "I never imagined you'd fight back this hard. Patricia was convinced you'd eventually go along with the plan to keep family peace. That was the core of their miscalculation. They had assumed I would prioritize family harmony over my own rights and boundaries. They had counted on my unwillingness to pursue serious consequences against my own parents. But the most tragic consequence was watching Jake's complete breakdown. Losing his marriage, his job, and his housing all within the space of 2 weeks had shattered his confidence and self-respect. He was staying in a cheap motel room, seeing his children only during supervised visits, and struggling to understand how his life had collapsed so completely. "I just wanted my kids to have what you had growing up," he told me during one of our few conversations. "A big house with space to play, financial security, family stability. When Mom and Dad offered to make that happen, I didn't ask enough questions. Jake, I grew up in the same house you did. We had financial security because Dad worked 2 jobs and Mom managed money carefully. The lake house wasn't part of my childhood. It became important to me because of the relationship I built with Grandpa there as an adult. But you inherited so much more than I did," he said. "The house, the trust fund, everything. It felt unfair. Grandpa left you tools and equipment worth $15,000 because you loved working with your hands. He left me the house because we had a specific relationship built around that place. It wasn't about favoritism or monetary value." But Jake's resentment ran deeper than simple inheritance issues. He felt that life had been easier for me because I had made different choices. Staying in school, pursuing a career, remaining single and mobile. My success felt like a judgment on his decisions to marry young, have children immediately, and prioritize family over career advancement. The family dynamics that had allowed this crisis to develop were becoming clearer. Patricia had spent years nurturing resentment about perceived unfairness in how Harold treated his grandsons. Jake had absorbed that resentment without questioning it. Robert had enabled Patricia's manipulation by refusing to stand up to her increasingly inappropriate schemes, and I had been oblivious to the growing hostility until it erupted into open theft and fraud. 3 weeks after the ultimatum, Patricia's legal challenge was dismissed by the probate court. The judge found no evidence of mental incompetence or undue influence in Harold's will amendment. Marcus had anticipated this outcome, since Patricia had no real evidence to support her claims. But instead of accepting defeat, Patricia doubled down. She gave an interview to the local newspaper, claiming that the legal system was biased against parents seeking to protect family assets from selfish adult children. This case represents everything wrong with how young people today view family obligations, she told the reporter. My father-in-law specifically intended for his property to benefit the entire family, not just one grandchild who wants to preserve it like a museum. The interview backfired spectacularly. Community members who read it were outraged by Patricia's continued refusal to accept responsibility for fraud and forgery. Several people wrote letters pointing out that Harold had been very explicit about his intentions for the lake house and had taken legal steps to ensure those intentions were honored. But for me, the interview confirmed that Patricia had learned nothing from the experience. She still viewed herself as a victim of unfair legal technicalities, rather than as someone who had committed serious crimes against her own family. The question now was whether anything could be salvaged from the wreckage of our family relationships, or whether some violations were too severe to forgive and forget. 3 months after the confrontation at the lake house, I received an unexpected call from Robert. His voice was barely above a whisper, and I could hear the exhaustion of someone who had reached the end of his emotional reserves. Gerard, I need to tell you something that Patricia doesn't know. She lost her job 6 months before we started the renovation project. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. What happened? Budget cuts at the school district. She was laid off from her teaching position and couldn't find another job. We've been living on my retirement income and her unemployment benefits, but it wasn't enough to help Jake when his family started struggling. Suddenly, the desperate quality of Patricia's schemes made more sense. She hadn't just been manipulating family dynamics for emotional reasons. She had been facing genuine financial crisis and saw the lake house as a solution to multiple problems. Why didn't anyone tell me you were struggling financially? I asked. Robert's silence stretched uncomfortably. Your mother was too proud to ask for help. She felt like she had already asked you for too much over the years, with Jake's medical bills and his periods of unemployment. When she researched the property law options, she convinced herself that redistributing Harold's assets was just a different way of solving family problems. Dad, there's a huge difference between asking for help and committing fraud. I know that now, he said miserably. But when you're desperate and someone you love is convinced they've found a legal solution, it's easy to rationalize going along with it. Over the following weeks, I learned more about the financial pressures that had contributed to the crisis. Jake was making $22,000 a year at a dead-end retail job with no benefits. Sarah couldn't work because childcare for twins would cost more than she could earn. They were facing eviction from their apartment when Patricia offered them the renovated lake house as a solution. Patricia had seen an opportunity to solve everyone's problems simultaneously. Give Jake's family better housing, increase the value of Harold's estate through improvements, and force me to contribute financially to family needs, whether I wanted to or not. Her mistake was believing that the ends justified the means, and that family relationships could survive the violation of trust required to implement her plan. But understanding the pressures didn't excuse the fraud. If anything, it made the betrayal more painful because it revealed how little faith my parents had in my willingness to help solve family problems through honest communication. I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I offered to help Jake get back on his feet, with conditions that protected everyone involved. Using money from Harold's trust fund, I paid for a 1-year lease on a modest 3-bedroom apartment in a good school district. I also offered to pay for Jake to complete a certification program in heating and air conditioning repair, which would provide him with marketable skills and better income potential. The conditions were non-negotiable. Jake had to accept responsibility for his participation in the fraud scheme, attend counseling to address his entitlement issues and financial planning problems, and commit to rebuilding his marriage through honest communication with Sarah. "Why are you helping me after what I did?" Jake asked when I presented the offer. "Because my anger is with the people who planned this scheme, not with the people who got swept up in it," I replied. "Your children are innocent, and they shouldn't suffer because their grandparents made terrible decisions." Sarah agreed to try reconciliation with Jake on the condition that he prove he could make responsible decisions and respect other people's boundaries. Their marriage had been damaged, but it wasn't necessarily destroyed if Jake could demonstrate genuine change. Patricia's response to my offer was telling. Instead of expressing gratitude that I was helping her son despite her betrayal, she complained that I was controlling the family through money and forcing people to humiliate themselves for basic assistance. "You're making Jake jump through hoops just to get what he should have received as inheritance in the first place," she argued. Her continued refusal to accept responsibility made it clear that our relationship couldn't be repaired without fundamental changes in her willingness to respect boundaries and acknowledge wrongdoing. Robert, however, surprised me by taking a different approach. He moved out of the house he shared with Patricia and filed for legal separation. After 43 years of marriage, he had finally reached the point where he couldn't enable her manipulative behavior anymore. "I should have stood up to her years ago," he told me. "I kept telling myself that keeping peace was more important than standing up for what was right. But watching what she did to you and Jake made me realize that avoiding conflict just allows problems to get worse." Robert moved into a small apartment and began attending counseling to address his patterns of passive enablement. He also started working part-time to supplement his retirement income, taking responsibility for his own financial security instead of relying on schemes to solve money problems. The legal resolution of the case took 6 more months. Patricia pled guilty to fraud charges and received 2 years of probation along with community service requirements. She was ordered to pay restitution for the property damage and legal costs, which effectively wiped out her remaining financial assets. Dennis Whitman faced disciplinary action from the State Bar Association after investigation revealed a pattern of advising clients to pursue legally questionable strategies in family property disputes. He was suspended from practicing law for 1 year and required to complete ethics training. But the most meaningful resolution came when I decided to renovate the lake house myself, this time to honor both my grandfather's memory and the needs of future generations. I restored the original structure that Harold had built, preserving the reading nook, the handmade kitchen cabinets, and the stone fireplace that held so many memories. But I also added a small guest cottage where family members could stay during visits, creating space for children and grandchildren without compromising the main house's integrity. I established a family trust that would ensure the property stayed in the Peterson family for generations, with specific language preventing any single person from claiming exclusive ownership or making unauthorized changes. Future beneficiaries would share decision-making responsibilities and maintenance costs, creating true family ownership rather than individual control. Jake completed his HVAC certification program and found steady work that paid enough to support his family. He and Sarah worked through their marriage problems and welcomed their 3rd child, a daughter they named Hope. Jake learned to take pride in earning his family's security through his own efforts rather than expecting inheritance or family assistance to solve his problems. Robert gradually rebuilt relationships with his children and grandchildren based on respect and honesty rather than manipulation and guilt. He learned to express his needs directly and to support family members without enabling destructive behavior. Patricia remained bitter and isolated, convinced that she had been treated unfairly by ungrateful family members and a biased legal system. She refused counseling and maintained her belief that she had been justified in trying to redistribute family assets according to her judgment of who deserved what. The lake house became a place of healing and celebration again. Jake's children learned to fish from the same dock where my grandfather had taught me. Sarah found peace in the screened porch where Harold and I had shared our deepest conversations. Robert discovered that he could enjoy his grandchildren's company without feeling responsible for solving all their parents' problems. I learned that protecting boundaries doesn't destroy families. It forces them to develop healthier dynamics based on mutual respect rather than manipulation and guilt. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable destructive behavior, even when that refusal causes temporary pain. The experience taught me that family loyalty doesn't mean accepting whatever treatment relatives choose to give you. True family love requires honesty, respect for individual autonomy, and willingness to address problems through communication rather than schemes and manipulation. My grandfather's wisdom in protecting the lake house through his will amendment went beyond just preserving property. He understood that some people view family relationships as opportunities for control and exploitation rather than mutual support and respect. His legal protections forced everyone to confront those unhealthy dynamics and choose whether to build something better. Today, the lake house serves its intended purpose as a place where family members gather to strengthen relationships, share memories, and pass down values to future generations. But now those gatherings happen on terms that respect everyone's autonomy and dignity. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give your family is the requirement that they treat you and each other with the respect that makes real love possible. Have you ever faced a situation where family members crossed major boundaries in the name of helping each other? How did you handle the balance between protecting yourself and maintaining family relationships? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life stories about family dynamics, boundaries, and personal growth. And don't forget to share this with anyone who might be dealing with similar family challenges. Sometimes, knowing you're not alone in these struggles can make all the difference. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that standing up for yourself doesn't make you selfish. It makes healthy relationships possible for everyone involved.